Before the world knew the name King Von, before the music videos, the interviews, and the stories that spread across the internet, there was a man whose presence was already felt in the streets of Chicago. His father, Walter "Silk" Bennett. Unlike his son, Silk never had a public platform. There were no songs, no social media posts, and very few official records about his life. What remains are memories, street stories, and the reputation he built in an era when your name carried weight long before the internet could document it. Walter Bennett was born in the 1970s, growing up during one of the most turbulent periods in Chicago's history. Entire neighborhoods were shaped by poverty, territorial conflicts, and a code of survival that demanded toughness from a very young age. People who knew him often described Silk as someone who moved with quiet confidence. He wasn't loud or flashy in conversation, but his presence spoke for itself. When he walked into a room, people noticed, not because he demanded attention, but because of the respect he commanded. Growing up, Silk spent much of his time around local parks and community spots where young people gathered. Some accounts suggest he had real talent in sports, especially basketball. Friends would later say that he had the discipline and ability to take the game seriously. And there were moments when it seemed like a different future might have been possible. But like many young men in environments filled with limited opportunities, the pull of street life was strong. Over time, Silk became increasingly involved in activities that brought fast money and influence, but also constant danger. As he got older, his reputation expanded. He was known as someone who understood how to navigate complex situations, a person who valued loyalty and expected the same in return. Those around him often mentioned that he kept his circle small, trusting only a few people. At the same time, Silk developed a reputation for living well. Nice cars, sharp outfits, and an ability to provide for those close to him made him a recognizable figure in his community. People saw him as someone who had figured out how to survive and even thrive under difficult circumstances. Family was also an important part of his life. Although the demands of his lifestyle sometimes kept him away, accounts suggest he maintained a connection with his children and took pride in them. When his son, Davon, later known as King Von, was born, Silk's influence was already part of the environment surrounding him. Even if they didn't spend every day together, the stories about his father's reputation traveled through the neighborhood, shaping how people viewed the young boy. Children often grow up hearing stories about their parents, and in communities where reputation matters, those stories can carry enormous weight. For Von, hearing about his father's name likely created a mixture of admiration and expectation. Throughout the years, Silk faced challenges that came with the life he lived. Encounters with the legal system and conflicts with rivals were part of the reality for many individuals in that world, and he was no exception. Still, people often recall that he carried himself with a certain code, valuing loyalty, standing by his word, and supporting those he cared about. Whether seen as a respected figure or a controversial one, he left a strong impression on those around him. In the mid-2000s, tragedy struck when Silk lost his life. The exact circumstances have been discussed in different ways over the years, with multiple versions of events circulating among those who claim to know what happened. What is widely agreed upon is that his passing sent shockwaves through his community. Losing someone with such a strong presence created a void that was felt by family, friends, and neighbors alike. For a young King Von, the loss of his father was a defining moment. Growing up without him meant navigating adolescence while carrying both grief and the legacy of his father's reputation. Many observers believe that this experience contributed to the perspective Von later expressed in his music. Themes of loyalty, loss, survival, and the realities of street life. As Von grew older, he often spoke about his father with respect, acknowledging the impact he had even in absence. The admiration was evident, suggesting that Silk remained an important figure in his life story. Looking back, it's impossible to separate the narrative of King Von from the environment that shaped him, and Silk was undeniably part of that foundation. The parallels between their personalities are often discussed: strong presence, deep loyalty to their circle, and a willingness to stand firm in difficult situations. The story of Walter "Silk" Bennett also reflects a broader reality experienced by many families: how circumstances, choices, and environment can influence generations. In neighborhoods where opportunities are limited and pressures are constant, the line between survival and risk can become blurred. Stories like Silk's are reminders of how complex these paths can be. Today, discussions about King Von often focus on his music and the events that brought him into the spotlight. But understanding where he came from means looking at the people and experiences that shaped his early life, including the father whose reputation preceded him. Even without widespread documentation, Silk's name continues to surface in conversations about Chicago's past, illustrating how influence can persist long after someone is gone. His story isn't just about one individual. It's about a time, a place, and the ripple effects that one life can have on another. And when people listen to King Von's music or reflect on his journey, they're also, in a way, hearing echoes of the legacy left behind by Walter "Silk" Bennett, a man whose story remains part of the larger narrative of Chicago's history.